Hello and welcome back to Parley. These are my on-the-spot responses to the prompts you folks submit. This one is from PistilWhip. Hope you'll enjoy listening. Weird little situation with this one. So we're gonna, I guess, analyze, sort of, a song called The Purge March by Deco Star Thing 27 and Takuya Yamanaka. Which is a song that I just happened to already have, like, on my phone, and it's a thing I listen to. PistilWhip, you heard this and told me that there were further layers to the experience that you wanted me to experience. And another nice thing is that it's in Japanese, and I am like an intermediate student of Japanese. You know, I don't speak Japanese well enough that I could confidently tell you what this song is about, but neither do I understand so little Japanese at all that I have no idea what this song is about. So when you mentioned, oh, there's like something weird going on, pretty quickly having heard the song, and if it's in the description if you want to listen to it with me, I thought, yeah, that about tracks. Like there was something weird going on in that song, and so today we're gonna listen to it. Now, you structured this parlay in this interesting way. Let me read the prompt, and then I'll explain what I mean by that. So the front of the prompt is, doubtlessly, clearly, absolutely, unequivocally, beyond any doubt, parlay. 'Tis ordained the subject of this parlay is the Purge March from Milgram, which is an interactive music project. That's what's created by Deco asterisk 27 and Takuya Yamanaka. More on that later, PistilWhip says. I have it on good authority that you've heard this song before, but never looked into the video and lyrics. Correct? This works well for my purposes. For this video, I would like you to listen to the Purge March 3 more times in succession. Once without the video, so just the audio. Once with the video and no subtitles, so I watch the video but don't know what the words mean, and then a final time with the video and with subtitles turned on, which combined with my understanding of Japanese, I will basically know what it is. You've also reproduced the lyrics in an attachment to the parlay. I trust, PistilWhip says, that Captain, like myself, is able to pick up on some of the more common Japanese phrases via exposure to anime and related media. Still, I think you'll have a fun trademark time with this song. Disclaimer / content warning, murder and child abuse. Oh, well, that gives me a bit of a spoiler for like what watch number 2 is gonna. I didn't think it was gonna be about that necessarily, but okay, you've been warned. Good that you. I don't mean to make light of such a thing. Just to say, okay, right, it's gonna be that kind of. Got it. So that's in the description. Now here's my plan for this parlay. You have, this parlay prompt is very long in total. In fact, it might be so long that it isn't even possible to do everything in this prompt in the time we have, but I'll try. And most of it is spoilered out because you wanted me to get to, I guess, like discover it by myself, you know? And so here, the plan I have is I don't really know when to read that stuff. So I'm gonna go listen to the song, pause this recording. That's a thing about how I record. I can just do that. And then I'll hit play again, tell you what I heard. You know, I'll just tell you about my experience of the song. If you want to go listen to it at that time, you could go do that. Again, it's linked in the description. Then once we're done with that, I will pause again and like go watch the video, tell you what I thought. You're getting it. Pause again, listen to the subtitles, and then we'll break down as much as I can of the stuff that you added as details. Again, there's a lot, so I'll do what I can. That's what we're doing. Okay, that's the plan. So first go round, I'm gonna go just listen to it again. It's on my phone, but just for the sake of consistency, so I listen to the exact same thing. You know, it's not like a slightly shorter edited version or anything. I'll listen to the video, but just tab over one or whatever. So it's not a very long song, so I'll see you in like 3 minutes. Obviously for you, it'll be instant. And yeah, I mean, I like this song, so it was mostly what I remembered. How do we break this song down? So it's got an interesting mood. It's called the Purge March. There is a marching band like little, not very deep drum at the beginning, and a girl's voice saying minasan something. She starts the sentence in a way that in Japanese means we're speaking to a group. She's like briefing them on something. I heard something like subarashi ichinichi, which means our wonderful everyday life, probably is where they're going with that. And it's very chipper, very upbeat, creepily upbeat, enough that you begin to suspect like what's going on here. I had always thought that about the song. I'm sure if you listen to it, you will think that immediately too. It's so saccharine in a way that you can only help but think like, is this to be honest, I thought of 1984 was sort of my initial reaction. That's probably not what's going on here based on the murder and child abuse content warning exactly, but okay, that's what it sounds like. She finishes her like a sentence or two little announcement about our subarashi ichi nichi, whatever is going on there, and then starts into the song. It's interesting from a structure perspective. This song kind of uses that little brief speech thing, short though it is, as like the verse and the intro, and then we sort of go into a bridge and then the first chorus, just like that. And the song starts very quickly once we are into proper music. It's the chorus. And this song is really interesting musically to me. This is why I always like this song. It has a weird mood and tone. It's kind of light and airy and quick and lots of high notes from our very high voiced singer. But it has this interesting sort of sense of rhythm to it, or atmosphere a little bit. It's kind of hard to describe the like exact musicality of the song. It sort of feels like a ballad, or there's almost something sad, or like where something good is ending or a bad thing is beginning happening. Could we possibly interpret the Purge March, the title, as being that? The song is called the Purge March. There's a marching part, so there's a purge. Not rocket science, but I'm just saying it does kind of sound like that. There's an implacable quality to the music. It doesn't, to me, sound like extremely similar to a lot of other music. And that has always struck me as like there is something a little weird going on. Lots of verbiage things worth noticing as well. For example, there's a part there's a lot of words that sound like shonen action scenes, basically. There's parts that are itemiru or yatemiru, like just try it, or come on, hit me, or there's a part at the end where they say something like chanto subushite aguryo, something that basically means I'll be sure to beat the shit out of you next time. Said in a very chipper, high-pitched voice, but I know enough Japanese to know that we're talking about violence for most of the song. The voice is not like that. So I would say if you're not going to listen to the song, that's the takeaway for the mood going into it. It's a rather upbeat on the surface song that very quickly has a slightly strange undertone where the subject matter and the way it is being discussed are at significant odds. And it's obviously aware of that. Again, to me, the way that tone hit was almost like an authoritarian regime is being positive about, we simply have to kill those dissidents. Like, let's go kill them. Like, if you're hiding any information, we'll kill your whole family. Like, smile. That is the vibe that I've always gotten from the song. And I have to say that is quickly being like semi-reinforced by the information we have. Okay, so now let's see the video. I would imagine that at this point, I'm going to know most of the things about the song, and that reading the subtitles will just clarify some points that we'll discuss later. So I'll see you in a second for that. Right. Okay, that was a bit more complicated than I expected. I took some basic notes. So you heard my summary from before. I think I can essentially describe the plot, if you like, and so that's the first reveal. This is a like very short story, I would describe what I saw as. We start with, indeed, that marching band drum that I described, a sort of speech. This is given from above to a group of girls in a marching band wearing rather conformisty, like white uniforms. We also see 3 or 4, I think 4, kind of strange flags, colored flags, like logos, sigils, I don't really know. There's an idyllic marching band. They do some marching band stuff. They're playing instruments. They've got the baton thing that you use. I don't know that much about marching bands. And one girl does a sort of flag toss thing, but messes it up. She like drops the flag slightly, not messes it up very badly. Another of the girls in the marching band suddenly immediately turns on her and has a sort of mallet-like scepter thing, as if she's going to like hit her or something for messing up. And the tone extremely quickly turns dark, and she sinks through, the girl that messed up sinks through the ground that they had been standing on, as if into a liquid or drowning. It's at this point that you think, unless this is extreme sci-fi, that means that this is a metaphor. Like, that she's not really here as such. The ground didn't change from a solid to a liquid with absolutely no outward indication of what was going on, and it's solid right next to her. You know what I mean? Like, it's a metaphor, I guess. And we go to a more dreary, more like reality. It's like not a good time, but in Japan. It's rainy. She wakes up kind of in the shower, sitting on the floor of the shower in what looks like a pretty dreary house. And she's taking care of a homeless cat on what kind of looks like her way to school. It sort of looks like a man and a younger girl come home, but the mail hasn't been collected in a while. So maybe she was there alone for a bit. I'm not really clear on that part. She goes home after maybe a day at school or whatever. And again, I feel like this part is probably reality. But when she closes the door, somebody has a taser. I guess the man from the man and the younger girl who went into her house before has a taser, and she looks horrified. We swap kind of back. What's the order of operations? We kind of swap back to the marching band thing, and now they look much more crazed. These spirals in their eye and a creepy, eerie smile that is clearly meant to be some sort of control or affect over these people. Also, the way that it's framed and structured makes me feel like what we were seeing in that dreary world is probably something like the backstory of the girl we were following. And it becomes clear that the marching band thing is what she is experiencing in her head while under the influence of something. And with this now spirally crazed look in her eye as she walks to school, we cut back to the house where somebody has been bludgeoned to death. There's a thing of blood, and one of the marching band girls with that mallet is standing there, clearly having beaten the person. If you wanted a straightforward interpretation of what all that means, I guess this girl is having a tough time in life, and her maybe parent, guardian, is abusing her pretty severely, if it includes a taser. But some, I guess, real force has murdered him for her, or it was her and the marching band person in their apartment is a metaphor. Like, it just represents that she did it. What is going on with her, though? Again, there's a part of me that's the interpreting literature part of me is saying, don't be too quick as a fantasy fan to say that this is magic, like that there's some kind of magical network of girls in a marching band hive mind in their heads, and they like mafia style executed her abusive parent. Like, all right, slow down. Like, okay, maybe, but like, slow down. You know, it could just be a metaphor. Like, it might just be that she has lashed out against her abusive parent or guardian, and the marching band thing is completely a metaphor. But so what does it mean? Being a sort of upright, excited member of society, or doing what you're supposed to do in the world? Again, I said there was a kind of authoritarian, everybody's wearing these crisp white marching band uniforms. Marching bands and most military imagery in general is pretty authoritarian or conformist looking a lot of the time. So I guess that is not that weird. I'm not really sure. So let's go one more time with the subtitles. I think that's most of what I had to say. And it'll be interesting to see if I can glean anything. We will then reveal over the course of this first third of the parlay, whatever is going on, I think will become as clear as it's going to be. So just a minute. Aha. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. Okay, so plenty of details. This was illuminating. No, I did learn a lot from this third part. Now, you've produced the lyrics, so I will read some stuff from them. Let's just start by giving you the right framing by reading the exact text translated of that like intro speech thing that I described to you at the beginning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's the beginning of a most wonderful day. However, there are blasphemers and silent bystanders who would have it out otherwise. We must not give in to them. They are the ones who should be judged. With pure, unsullied body and soul, let us preach all that is true and right. And there's a little bridge to the chorus that I was describing, which you're labeling as the verse. Fair enough. I'm just so the audience knows which part I meant. That says, "'Tis ordained, thou shalt follow thine destiny. 'Tis ordained, thou shalt discard vulgarity. 'Tis ordained, thou shalt deliver unto those thou believest in. 'Tis ordained, thou shalt stay thine course, then perish." So I'm going to say a pretty totalitarian regime situation. Also, just by watching it a second time, a visual thing I noticed that I could have learned from the previous watch through is, yeah, there are those like flags that have sigils of a sort on them. But when we go back into the sort of marching band metaphor or whatever it is, they're united. Everybody has a similar flag that has like the 4 colors of that previous flag and a vaguely eye-like shape in the center. Don't get me wrong, if you watch this, you've seen it's not very direct totalitarian imagery necessarily. You know, the logo, if it is that, or the flag or whatever, is kind of cutesy or like a cartoony logo that looks vaguely like an eye watching over you. But I mean, it's also a logo that looks like an eye watching over you a little bit. So anyway, I would say from the way this is worded, it sure seems like there's some kind of dogmatic group that is being suggested by this text. Okay, and so a few other details. Yeah, I would say I speculated previously that at the end, when one of the marching band people, or was it her, or did it represent that she did it, kills, like, presumably the guy in that apartment that was abusing that girl. Is that her? And upon watching her baton twirling the second time more closely, I can see there's blood on the baton. The metaphor baton has some blood on it. So I think it's pretty clear that it is this girl. She sort of got pushed too far, and then something happened, maybe magical if that is what is going on in this world, or the collective did their thing or something, and then, you know, bam. Now, another detail, again, this is visual, but with the extra framing of knowing the lyrics, there's this other detail that is the older person and the younger girl come back to the house with a balloon that has the symbol that all the marching band people have on their flag. And there's this line that I had read to you earlier that says, specifically, sorry, I scrolled down too far. "'Tis ordained, thou shalt deliver unto those thou believest in. Thou shalt deliver unto those thou believest in. 'Tis ordained, thou shalt stay thine course, then perish." So the idea that the Guardian somehow is involved with this group with the eye-like logo, and yet was maybe killed, or somebody was killed because of that, might actually be part of their thing. Again, there's a very 1984 was surprisingly spot on. I want to kind of, you know, as a possible interpretation, there's a Big Brother like betray anybody if the state says so kind of vibe that I've been getting, on top of just like abuse. Now there's a line when she I said she's in the marching band, but then she messes up a flag throw and then sort of sinks into the ground supernaturally, seemingly, or it's a metaphor. And right at that part, they say, like, people who, you know, whose eyes are corrupted or whatever must be purged. And so it's pretty clear that she sort of defied the regime in some way, or tried to run away, but then it failed or needed their protection, and so went back, was kind of a vibe I was maybe getting. I'm not totally sure on that part. I will just say quickly, you're getting it from context, but I will just say quickly that in no way does reading the full text make it crystal clear. You know what I mean? This isn't that kind of work. It is going to leave itself up for interpretation, in my opinion. There are some parts that I'm clearer on now, but not all of it, you know what I mean? Like, and that's normal, that's fine. It is meant to be in some way vague to leave open interpretations. It's not that the details are vague, it's more like an archaeological kind of vagueness, something I really enjoy, and I think a lot of people who don't get into interpreting media don't always get. That there's a difference between being unclear on purpose and just letting us see what happened in the world, and then it can be kind of fun to like just figure through what's going on. How about this? it doesn't matter exactly what the meaning is. It doesn't matter what the people who wrote it say the meaning is. That's not somehow the prime or true meaning. And if you watch Parley, probably a lot of this is a little old hat to you. You at least know I already think that, even if you don't agree, which is fine, by the way. Just to say that much of interpretation just isn't interesting or necessary if what you're doing is just trying to figure out the correct answer. I have no interest in this, and so I'm saying if you accept that model of criticism, I would argue there really isn't a exact set meaning here, but it seems vaguely like, yeah, there's some group that's sort of like consumed or subsumed this character. And at the end, we get a clarification that though the song continues and we kind of get the chorus or post-chorus again, rather than this recurring line that is in the choruses where they say, after you cry, repent, and kneel, it'll be your turn to say that hopeless I'm sorry. And they repeat it. After you cry, repent, and kneel, it's now your turn to say that hopeless I'm sorry. And then at the end, the character says, there's a background voice, you're sorry, I don't care. Please go ahead and die already. Remember my cries, my repents, my words of I'm sorry that I said to you. And I think that way of wording it very clearly implies that there's a sort of philosophy of reciprocity or reciprocal, like retaliating from this, whatever the Purge marching group is. Plus, this is our focus character thinking this at the person that she kills toward the end of the video, I think. It seems fairly clear that that part connects up with the, like, she's being abused, basically, by her guardian, and somehow this group or philosophy or magic causes her to be able to deal with it. You know, I said before, I don't want to be too quick to assume it's magical, but a very few steps interpretation of what we've seen here is she's a magical girl and she uses the magical girl powers to kill her abusive guardian, but the magical girl thing is like sort of an evil Madoka Magica but brainwashing magical girl thing, and she gets kind of sucked back into the Purge March collective. That, with very few additional steps, basically explains everything I saw. So let's just keep that in mind as a usable narrative of what's happening here. It could be that there's we're about to find out from PistilWhip's things that there's a cinematic universe of music videos by this artist or artist group. You kind of made it sound that way a little bit, and that there is this secret society and that is who it was, and like there's all this lore connected to this media project. But also it could just be that they're like magical girls or something and it's a bit dark. Like that, I don't know. There's plenty of existing magical girl shows where basically this happens. So that would not be like that weird. It's not so confusing is the point I'm trying to make, right? I think a lot of people, I don't know your life, audience members, but a lot of people who don't like the idea that there is no right answer to interpreting things, part of the reason, I think, is that it kind of sounds like that makes it harder to understand something unclear. But I don't think that it does. I think you just need to be willing to take seriously your own interpretations. And usually there will be an Occam's razor-y, simplest explanation kind of way for the narrative to exist. I find it helpful sometimes to just hold on to that and keep my mind open to what else it could be. So I feel like I basically understand what I watched, even though there could be multiple meanings, if that makes sense. So there we go. We'll probably end up reading other lyrics, but let's now move on to the second part of the parlay, which is going to be reading the spoilers. So you spoilered out a bunch of stuff right at the beginning. Let's do that in order, I guess. So I'm going to click some of those spoilers. Let's just click a few and then we'll see how it is. Okay, so it begins. PistilWhip says, for background information, Milgram, stylized all caps Milgram, Milgram, is an interactive music project created by musician, Vocaloid producer, and songwriter Deco*27. I'm sorry if you're supposed to be saying that another way, and producer, animation planner, and scriptwriter Takuya Yamanaka, excuse me. The creative studio that manages the Milgram project is Otoiro, named for Oto, sound, and Iro, color, Otoiro, and is founded by Deco himself. I'm worried that Otoiro pronounced my way sounds too much like toire, which is toilet in Japanese, but Otoiro is a beautiful name for an animation studio. Anyway, the eponymous prison, what? Of Milgram houses 10 inmates, all murderers. Okay, so you remember what I said about the cinematic universe? Okay, anyway, the focus character, the prison guard EES, is charged with interrogating the inmates and checks notes, extracting music videos, MVs, from their minds in order to learn about their crimes and motives. Whoa, okay, just... The focus character, the prison guard S, is charged with interrogating the inmates and checks notes, extracting music videos from their minds in order to learn about their crimes and motives. It's a cinematic universe of Inception Persona 5 prisoners that are having their memories read through the format of music videos, and this is one of those. Okay, that's not very close to what I guessed, or what, frankly, anybody on Earth would ever guess. Okay. The Milgram project proceeds in distinct phases. Text-based interrogations, like Q&A. Oh, like with the creators, but they're flavored as interrogations. Interesting. On the Milgram Portal mobile app, okay, a voice drama immediately preceding the MV extraction, which is the music video itself, and then lastly voting in the app for an innocent or guilty verdict. Whoa, cool. Okay, that's what you meant by interactive and media project. It's kind of like a light ARG, like augmented reality game a little bit. The Purge March is the MV associated with the inmate Momose Amane's second trial. It actually depicts the same events as Amane's first trial MV, which is called Magic, but in a less abstract way. Okay? Specifically, the Purge March clearly lays out Amane's crime and motive. She murdered her mother as punishment for child abuse. Okay, so there we go. You've confirmed through experience with the media franchise. So that was her mother. She was being abused, and she did murder her mother. Okay, certainly the moment you said they're extracting music videos from their minds to learn about their crimes, it's like, okay, well, on a basic level, that was a music video about a crime being committed, I guess. 2 crimes, at least, the abuse and the murder. If you don't rule the murder as being in self-defense, which seemed like it was to me. They took out a taser the moment she got home. Anyway, I'm not just going to say you can just kill people if they take out a taser. That's left as homework for the viewer. How about that? But on a basic level, that does make sense. Okay, so second trial. Does that mean that this is a media franchise where if people vote innocent, they might get tried again? Innocent means like we want more music videos of that song, right? This is going to be complicated to do in the space of only half, or we have a little more than a third of the parlay left, because you kind of have to treat everything as having a corollary, right? There's text-based interrogations, but non-diegetically, not in the universe of the story or the media project. Those are Q&As with the real creators of the media. There are music videos which are diegetically like this is the crime, or it's kind of like their defense in court, you're making it sound like. But non-diegetically, this is the music video that's being made, I guess, because that character is popular and was voted innocent, question mark? You see what I mean? Maybe that's how it works. Okay, 2 more spoilers. It seems like this is the time to read this. Without getting into the details of Amane's history and family situation, her mother was strict and violent toward her, going so far as to use a taser on a 12-year-old girl. Thank you. There's also a shot of heavy bruising on Amane's temple or forehead area in the MV. Yes, after we go back to... after we revert to, like, reality, I'm interpreting the marching band part as being a metaphor of some sort, or magic. After we go back to reality, she looks visibly wounded, right? That was something I noticed, but just thought, okay, she's either just got a rough life or that's the abuse. But then the taser slightly threw me. She's just got a very violent, abusive parent. Okay, got it. And yet, the Purge March sounds so happy, PistilWhip continues, for the most part. Why? Indeed. One might guess that Amane's childlike innocence is shining through, but the interrogations and voice drama revealed that she's fully aware of what she did and has rationalized the murder as a non-criminal act. Okay. I have additional thoughts on specific parts of her interrogation and the Purge March's lyrics and visuals, which I will quarantine in an attached thread. Yep, let's go. Okay, so you have... I'm just going to recount that thread for you as we go through. Those spoilers we talked about, great. The full lyrics, very helpful. The album cover, let's just load that up real quick. Here you go. So as you can see, looks like I get she looks significantly different. This is the same person. So she looks very different. This must be her when she's in containment, I suppose. Is the trial like of supernatural in nature? This is a pretty crazy outfit. Anyway, okay. Neat. That's what that looks like. Very interesting. Art evolution. Oh, we might want to. Ooh, yeah, we're going to want to bring these up. I'll load them in, but let me read the context first. So art evolution. For comparison, PistilWhip says, here's Amane's art from season 1 and season 2. I'll show you in a minute. Viewers gave her a guilty verdict in season 1, in part due to a misunderstanding, like misguided hypothesis in the community, and she did not take the verdict well. That's terrifying. In particular, her eyes have lost their shine, which we all know is a clear sign of good mental health, asterisk. No, you're not saying it. It should be perhaps be noted that the margin was rather slim for both verdicts. That is interesting. She was given a guilty verdict in season 1 with a 51.66% in favor vote, and a not guilty verdict in season 2 with a 51.32% in favor vote. Thus, even with the motive for her crime laid bare, a significant number of people still thought she was not to be forgiven. That is telling. So just to clarify, I'm inferring that season 1 is the same crime, and it was shown in a music video, and you said less clearly, and she was voted guilty, but almost precisely 50-50. Like 49% of people disagreed. And then season 2 was this, people watched this, and almost 50% of people disagreed that whether she was guilty or innocent. That's surprising. This didn't seem to me like the type of thing that would be an open and shut case for most people. Sure, fine. However, I am surprised by that. That's one of the most explicit and at least implied to be incredibly intense depictions of child abuse I've seen in media in a while. And so it's hard to believe that that many people think that it's like people can torture you to death and it's not okay to retaliate in any way. Again, whatever you think about that, don't you think it's a little bit surprising that people would be so evenly split? Like, maybe it's because they don't understand it to be that like that. That's just my synthesis of what I saw. You know, to play devil's advocate, as it's only responsible to do, we don't actually see almost any like literal abuse from her parent. So I guess if I was trying to understand why somebody would be so adamant that it was unjustified to try to defend yourself, to be fair, we don't see how necessary it was to actually murder the person. You know what I mean? So, okay, you can tell I personally think it's pretty unfair to blame this child for this, but I'm trying to be open-minded. And I guess technically we're not seeing them actually get like the wounds or get hit. And so I guess maybe some people are thinking of it that way. That's interesting. That is surprising. Let me show you the two arts, because that is kind of interesting. And I think it's telling that people voted differently, and like there was a redesign of the character, and that coincided with people voting in her favor. But we shouldn't put too much weight on that because the vote was so even. So anyway, I'll just pull those up quickly. Okay, so here's the season 1 design. As you can see, pretty chipper overall, and I would say this is closer to how she looks in the video I watched, whereas the season 2 design, here I'll change it, is yeah, she isn't looking great. Though you did say she didn't take it. They did vote her guilty in season 1. I don't know what that means in this context, but okay, you know, that's a lot worse, as you know, as well you would expect it to be for a character like this. Okay. But you can see that it's interesting, right? Like from a character design strictly perspective, the character design sheet for this character is similar. You know, her outfit is basically the same. It's her mood that has changed. I gather that this is meant to be, this is like in the future of her conscious existence, but the exact same entity in person. And it looks bad, as you would expect, right? In fact, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek, right? I've been able to look ahead at the categories for the remaining third of this parlay, and the next part is going to be of interest to you if you thought that dealing with is it okay for a child to murder their abusive parent was a little bit too quick and ham-fisted of me. These are my responses on the spot to the prompts you folks submit, sure, but I did actually look ahead a little bit. We will be tackling that a little bit more structuredly in this section. Age, thought, and free will. I assume this is an excerpt from the Q&A or interview. You start, I think, a cold open for us, PistilWhip, with the text of that interview. I'm Momose Amane. I'm 12 years old. I'm in 6th grade of primary school. Nice to meet you. About me having killed someone, well, that may be true. However, I believe that I did the right thing. If you think that I'm in the wrong, I too will deem you to be in the wrong. Okay, starting off with a PistilWhip says, Amane acknowledges that she's a child and that she has killed someone. In fact, when asked, do you regret your murder? She replies, no, it was a natural obligation. Indeed, prison guard S remarks that Amane looks like a child, but does not speak like one. They go on to mention that Japanese law takes age into account when judging a person's deeds, which I believe in many countries that's true, but that's a rather major entity in Japanese law, in my opinion, from even my meager knowledge. That was something I had already been thinking when I watched this. Is she tried in Japanese legal terms? Because that's about to cause, well, you'll see. Amane says, I'm disappointed. You don't seem to be taking me seriously merely based on the fact that I'm a child. S, the prison guard, says, but it is true that the parents' influence on adolescence is strong, isn't it? Compared to adults, you are a lot more dependent on your parents. Amane says, I see. Then are the things that I, as a 12-year-old, think irrelevant? Are you going to cast aside the feelings that I know I have in this very moment, purely based on the fact that I have not yet lived for a very long time? Judging these things based on someone's age will not take you very far. Do I, at age 12, not have my own will? Ooh, does Mu-san, prisoner number 4, at age 16, have more of a free will than I do? Does Yuno-san, prisoner 2, at age 18, have more of a free will? Does Futa-san, prisoner 3, at age 20, have an entirely free will? Presumably other people in the project. S says, Amane, ... Amane says, furthermore, isn't it condescending of you to assume that just because I happen to be a child, I'm incapable of hating someone enough to kill them? S just says ... And Amane concludes, you said earlier that you have no intention of treating me like a child. However, by saying that I don't seem like the type to kill someone purely based on my age, that is precisely what you are doing. PistilWhip says, these are troubling questions for a child to be asking. Indeed. So, that's a whole parlay right there that we're not going to do because we don't have time in this one. And honestly, I'm not even sure if we're going to get to the end of the rest of the stuff you have prepared, but it's pretty fun, so we'll go as far as we can. It would be interesting to do an entire parlay just unpacking that good, if a little predictable argument. Not that it's good because I then agree with it. I'm just saying I think this is part of the question to ask. If you've ever engaged in a sincere, actual philosophical debate, rather than just philosophy 101, one of the obvious things to ask here is, children do change their quality of consciousness in some appreciable way as they grow up, but what do we do with this situation where we have people that are spread between the ages of 12 and 20, and are then asked to say, if a person who is younger doesn't have as much free will or agency and is more tied to their parents, where then do we say that changes? And it's relatively famous, in my opinion, a targeting point for everything from joining the military to the drinking ages, etc., all over the world, that people are often kind of allowed to do things in an order that doesn't really make much sense if you think about it as who they are as people. Again, in the United States, there's a very famous thing that goes, you're allowed to go to war and die at 18, but you're not allowed to have a beer until 21. And if you've lived in some parts of the US, compared to other countries, the drinking laws are stricter, in my opinion, having traveled to some nearby countries. People usually check even significantly older people's ID, or when I don't get carded, for example, we often do have a brief conversation about it. I had an amusing incident where I went to a pretty local place that has a really good bar, but it's a restaurant. And I ordered a cocktail with Lagavulin 16 year in it, which is a very smoky, peaty Scotch whiskey that tastes like salt and fire and is expensive. It's $90 a bottle. And so a drink including it is, more than $10. More expensive than other drinks. And I said, can I have this? And they looked at me, you look at me, and said, can I see your ID? And then they paused, and then they read the drink and went, you're ordering a Lagavulin drink. You don't need to show me your ID. And they left. And I laughed because that's kind of normal around these parts. But that's the type of exchange you often have. And so it is a little weird. I'm not saying it's not good to treat alcohol seriously, but it's good to treat going to war seriously. Anyway, something United States military. The point is, we don't have further time. I think this is a good entry point to this topic. I personally don't think do I at age 12 not have my own will? Does Futa-san, Prisoner 3, at age 20 have an entirely free will? I don't think that this is going to end up being that good of a line of inquiry for this philosophical subject, having had these conversations before. I think this is not that strong of an argument, but it is not an irrelevant point to start with. The beginning thing is you do bear the burden of saying when you think it is reasonable to treat people as if their actions hold weight. I just think we will all agree that having some kind of cutoff where we say there is no answer, so once you're 18 or whatever, then we say that's okay, is not unreasonable just because it's imperfect. That's like saying that stoplights are bad because sometimes you wait and there's no cars there. You know what I mean? It's still good to have some standard, despite the fact that it's imperfect. Maybe it would be worth criticizing that we don't have very many systems to adapt that standard in situations where it's obviously in question. For example, if somebody does something that they're not supposed to be able to do until they're age 21, they drink at 20, and let's say the society took that very seriously, could we perhaps acknowledge that because they're close to the time when they're meant to be able to do it, and we already had established the 21 as an age marker that is, we acknowledge imperfect, then can't we be reasonable and say if it's close to being allowed, then we go into a little more detail? I mean, under what circumstances did you do this? You see what I mean? Could those details perhaps matter more the closer it is to our imperfect, but it's the best we've got standard? Could that not be reasonable? And I, having had these discussions before, personally think that that is a stronger line of inquiry. You see how that kind of comes from asking this question. So yeah, that's cool. For what it's worth, a well-thought 12-year-old could vaguely say these things, especially after being in prison and committing murder. And these are not such ludicrously mature or advanced arguments as for it to be ridiculous for somebody, who is younger to argue them, even if she didn't study philosophy in school or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not that crazy of a thing to think, especially if you yourself were tried for murder at age 12. So for what it's worth, I feel like that was an interesting section to read. It was fun to read that part. That part's cool. This is what I want. Okay, thank you. The next section, we are shifting a little bit, but we talked a lot about what did she actually do in the real world part of the music video I described to you. But what about the marching band part? That was a really weird choice for this kind of setting. And one thing I noticed that I'm now seeing in the graphic you're showing is that there's a rainbow in both the marching band thing and in her real life. It's raining and cloudy in her real life. In the marching band thing, it's clear skies, but it's clear skies, there's blue skies, it's not raining, but it's cloudy still. I thought that was a little interesting. There's a lot of stuff obscuring your sight lines in the marching band thing. You say, children, balloons, and the pursuit of happiness. Children typically enjoy balloons for a number of reasons: their colors, weightlessness, association with celebration, etc. My hypothesis is that for Amane, for all her touted maturity, she's not an exception to this. One need not look any further than her fantasized world. Amane sees rain clouds as balloons and raindrops as confetti. Oh, okay, I see. Yep, sure, that's a strong metaphor. We switch from cloudy sky with the rainbow to clear skies, balloons, and confetti, and that's meant to represent, got it, yep, that makes sense. Kind of surprised that I didn't think of that. Balloons have distinct boundaries. It's easy to discern where the balloon begins and ends. And if one goes back to the start of the video, even the light dawning on the parade follows a perfectly straight line. This parallels Amane's black and white morality. Ah, interesting. And we might now go back and interpret that reading. Puts the initial lines, "'Tis ordained, thou shalt follow thine destiny. 'Tis ordained, thou shalt discard vulgarity." You remember that thing I was reading? As I got kind of hung up on these being external values, but looking at the way that Amane defended her actions, yes, there's a black and whitedness to that philosophy. Or, you know, she's making the, do I at age 12 not have my own will? Does Futa-san at age 20 have an entirely free will? That sounds like a slippery slope argument, but she's being an absolutist. If I can explain these things at all, I have my full agency. The implication of the argument she's making is it's irrelevant entirely what age the subject is. Not like, she's not attempting to engage in like, oh, what age means you have free will is wrong. She's saying that entire point is invalid, which I don't agree. I think that there is room for both. I don't see it as black and white like that. It's funny that the prison guard seems to be pretty amenable. Like, that's a really strong argument to her, which is interesting. But anyway, cool. Okay. I definitely like that reading. The black and white morality. This parallels Amane's black and white morality. It certainly does. Thus, rain clouds are not nebulous, dark things that bring sadness and chaos, but instead harbingers of good times and order. That's interesting. I think the shift back indicates that she thinks that orderliness is good. If we interpret that as being in her head, she shifts back to imagining the marching band and being sort of part of that. And we can now describe the spiral effect in her eyes as perhaps her own zealotry. Might we interpret it that way? She's embracing her own sort of absolutism. We are getting a little bit more of that, at least, before we go. Now, this parlay is now long enough that I'm trying to see, like, some of these we can kind of summarize, but I want to pick if we're going to pick one. I think this part is really good, so I'm going to do it. And I don't want to spend too much time deciding what route to take through this discussion. On crime, motivation, motive, and reflection. PistilWhip says, at the very end of the MV, Amane can be seen standing over a pool of blood. This is likely a recreation of the moments just before she was apprehended. Right, remember, in the lore of the series media project, in the diegesis of the project, the music video we're seeing is an abstract representation of what happened. And so, right, it's a recreation of the moments just before she was apprehended. You, of course, wouldn't be able to see that. If she's wearing her marching band outfit and standing over her, she just killed her mother, she wasn't literally wearing a marching band outfit. That's being caused by the way that the music video was created. This is a clever little technique on the part of the creators to make it so we can depict real events that really happened using visual metaphor, but the audience can understand that that didn't literally happen while she was wearing a marching band outfit. And that sort of, I would gather people who watch this media project just understand that intuitively. I think that's all right. Again, I've only known about any of this for 40 minutes, so give me a break. But I think that's what's going on. Anyway, yes, likely a recreation of the moments just before she was apprehended. Right, we see from the view of the door her standing over a puddle of blood. Right, cool. So maybe she got arrested right there. An attentive viewer might notice that her baton was already bloody when she twirled it on the way home. Definitely a blink and you'll miss a detail. Yep, I only noticed the second time I watched it. I doubt that Amane's umbrella, she is seen using an umbrella, which mirrors the flag and scepter thing that she's wielding and the marching band thing, despite the MV's connections between it and the fantasized baton. An umbrella of the kind of grade a grade schooler can carry is unlikely to have much mass, and said grade schooler likely could not disable an adult with a single strike, even with a blow to the head. In that scenario, there ought to have been more signs of a struggle, but I digress. Sure, and were we to spend a parlay digging into, like, what evidence we have about what happened, remembering that the music video isn't actual footage of the event, but is a recreation of the event from, like, reading her mind or whatever is going on in this shared thing. one might note that it is a little unclear exactly what happened if she murdered an adult with like something we saw on screen. As you say, if she had an umbrella that a grade schooler would carry, imagine a 10 or 12-year-old child hitting you, if statistically an adult, hitting me, if you like, I'm 32, as hard as they can directly on your head, right? It would hurt, but I would not like pass out and die. You know what I mean? Like the umbrella would probably break, I would imagine. And it would hurt badly, I would think. But first of all, the angle isn't even really, basically what's being implied, and I think what PistilWhip you're implying a little bit, if you don't mind me speculating, is that does call into question how much she was defending herself in that moment, if that's the implication here. Was her mother simply asleep and Amane like bludgeoned her with something to death? That's a bit different than she was being actively attacked and she defended herself, Anyway, we don't have enough detail to know. And again, the layer that we're not actually seeing real footage of the event does make it difficult to make that type of argument. Anyway, I mentioned that Amane has rationalized the murder as a non-criminal act. More specifically, she firmly denies that it was murder in her season 2 voice drama. Yes, we get a little bit more before we go. She argues that killing her mother was an act of faith and not one of sin. I'm looking forward to see her defend that. Here are supporting questions and answers from her interrogations. First, trial question 8. Between ethics and emotion, which do you prioritize? Amane says both are trivial. I'm just going to read the questions. Do you regret your murders in quotes? Amane says, no, it was a natural obligation. That's same wording from before. State the name of your victim. Amane says, there is no victim, only those who were served punishment. What does love mean to you? Amane says, to spread mercy with no limits. Did you love the person you killed? Amane says, I love them. Yes. What do the people you respect think about your sin? She says, I just followed what I've been taught, so obviously they'll praise me and tell me that I did good. And finally, is there anything you wish your parents would have done? And she says, my mother should have kept her faith to the very end. Taken together, Amane's outlook on her crime could be summarized as, my mother, who I loved, failed to keep her faith. I delivered punishment and mercy, as I had been taught. Ethics and emotion had nothing to do with it. It was a natural obligation. Very relatable grade schooler thoughts. Right, like, obviously, no. No, they're not. Sure, and you can see this mirrored a little bit in the dialogue from earlier, that what sounds like her defending her agency as a younger child, if you take it combined with those comments she just made, it becomes pretty clear that this is an absolutist philosophy, not a straightforward level 1 rejection of the idea that they're not treating her like with agency or whatever, but a broader critique of this idea that like normal rules can determine whether it's worthwhile to act a certain way. There's a sort of self-determinism in here that's being argued that isn't really the same as just saying, like, why don't you treat me with more agency? Even though I personally think that it is at least arguable whether this is a murder or not. There at least are arguments both ways. I certainly do sour to Amane's argument from before. It feels disingenuous in the light of these comments. It's pretty clear that she's just saying, I think that the rules don't have to apply to me and some other people. And therefore, no matter what I did, as long as there's some ethical system, or what I see as an ethical system, that permits it, it is allowable. And I can just say that the rules are whatever work for me, and that means it's okay. And for you to impose your rules is invalid regardless of the rules. They just don't apply to me somehow. Now, obviously, it's reasonable to interpret that as something she learned from her parents, right? Could an abusive parent have made her feel like this? I think that's a pretty obvious interpretation, sure. I don't mean to blame her necessarily. I'm just saying that I think it's only reasonable to take these comments about being defensive about age as being something that is part of a larger value system, rejecting the idea that things are like okay or not based on basically what she did, and that it's all interpretation. There's absolutely nothing whatsoever wrong with murder if it has the right context. I just, nope, like there can be as justified a murder as you want, and it's still bad that you murdered someone, in my opinion. And so there's a larger critique of normal morality going on here, whether you agree with me or her or not. None of us or only one of us or not. I hope you at least see my point. She's not just saying, oh, like because I have agency, therefore my thoughts matter. She's saying that context matters absolutely, and like the event itself is nothing. It doesn't matter what it was. Again, between ethics and emotion, which do you prioritize? Both are trivial. Is okay, hey ho. I'm going to have to skim some remaining parts, but I want you to know what was in this parlay without it being ridiculously long, so I'm going to tell you what the other parts were. There's the lyrical analysis, sin and dogma. This is a section where we talk about the principles that support the core of Amane's beliefs. There is a section on guilt and forgiveness, which is about, basically like when things are forgivable or guilty, or whether they are. You might recall me picking out Yudusaranai, or I didn't say this part, but there's a thing as we bridge into the chorus where she says zettai, 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 zettai a bunch of times, Yudusaranai, which means like really, 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 really unforgivable. As sort of the happy-go-lucky, but she's saying something really bleak, bridge into the chorus. You remember early on, I clocked that there is something weird going on with that part of the song. And so that's where we get into that a little bit. It's becoming pretty clear to me that we're going to have to just do a longer one, and PistilWhip and I will work it out, because we got to do all these parts, right? There's a third lyrical analysis part about the chorus, and then a fourth, the sentencing. And I want to do that part of the parlay a lot. So because this one took a while to come out, let's say I'm going to pause it right now and read the parts that I avoided reading because I didn't want to spoil myself, and then we're just going to do them. All right, we're in the second half now. This is going to be a very lyrical analysis-y part of the parlay, if you would be so interested. Let's get started. So first of all, with sin and dogma, there's background material that is going to add a piece of context that has been bothering me for most of this first hour of the parlay, if you've been catching it. PistilWhip says, getting into lyrical analysis proper, let us start with the 4 principles that form the core of Amane's beliefs. In the background material, Amane is established as having been raised in a deeply religious household. Aha! It is likely that the 4 dogma were directly handed down from her parents. These are the 'tis ordained, thou shalt, blanket, those 4 things you remember from earlier. So the first one, thou shalt follow thine destiny. PistilWhip says, I think this one is fairly straightforward, or at least I have no deeper thoughts on it. Certainly, something I'd like to just preface this whole section with that I think is interesting to think about. Whenever you read dogma, one ironclad rule that can never be changed doesn't usually lead to very nuanced philosophy. And I think it's useful to notice when you read dogmatic statements like this, that they don't have a set meaning. Like there's a convenient flexibility for the people involved in the dogma. This is very similar to the phenomenon where people will quote often the Bible, for example, but take that to mean something that often isn't a completely disingenuous interpretation of what it says, but definitely is an interpretation of what it says. That's just how we use language. Before you say, oh, but like they're just saying this is the definition of this word. The way we use naturalistic language is not by using strict definitions. So any claim of any meaning for any dogmatic statement that doesn't have further context is an interpretation, according to me. So that's what I mean when I say interpretation here. You're going to notice as we talk through these, that phenomenon of saying a specific ironclad rule, but in a way where the contents of the rule are left, I'm arguing intentionally, this is a problem with all such things, kind of easy to open-endedly interpret. And you will notice it right now with "thou shalt discard vulgarity." Vulgarity. What is vulgarity? Well, vulgar things. It's like flipping people off and sex jokes and farting and stuff, you know? PistilWhip adds, the Latin vulgus means common people. Vulgaris, then, means of the common people. Thus, to discard vulgarity is to avoid the thoughts and behaviors of the common people, i.e. outsiders. While that is certainly an interpretation, I think that makes sense in the context of the piece. It felt culty, and so what would a cult likely conveniently interpret discard vulgarity as meaning? Well, you can't do the vulgar things, of course. The list of vulgar things that we all know, that is shared among the people that are insiders, and that only the outsiders who are vulgar do. The specific list of things that we all know, which doesn't exist anywhere as a single codified list in many of these cases. A lot of the time, for example, you'll have cases like, if you want to look into this more, an example I know about is a Mormon interpretation of what counts as a vice. Specifically, does caffeine count as a vice is a really common problem for philosophies like that. Whatever you think about Mormonism, it's just an example I happen to be aware of. It's a case where they've made a single dogmatic statement in the past, and Mormonism is like relatively modern, but that statement just isn't really possible for that to actually explain what they mean, because I would argue in many cases these dogmas intentionally don't mean a set specific thing, but are treated as if they do, or like people, it's convenient for them, but they can act like they do. And so there are some really interesting cases, no judgment, genuinely pretty interesting to me, cases of the Mormon folks like trying to figure out what to do about some nebulous vices. Again, caffeine is something human society has kind of stopped seeing as a drug. And so, but what do? Like, it does significantly physically affect most people, you know. Just notice that what the vulgar things are is hardly clear. Now, based on the visuals from the Purge March and Amane's first trial MV, which was called Magic, if you remember, PistilWhip says, it seems that treating the injuries of a stray cat crosses the line into vulgarity. Yes, it seems like the reason for that weird scene that I'm not even sure I mentioned in my analysis because I didn't know how to fit it in. I have no idea why it was there. Where Amane is treating a stray cat. I think I did say that part. Well, an older man and a girl that looks about Amane's age are looking down on her from above, like in that feature of many Japanese areas where they have a sort of lowland with a river and then like a highland thing. Are those called dikes? Anyway, up above with a bridge over it. If you've watched any amount of anime, you're probably picturing the right thing. There's that depression and then there's a river, and people often have anime high school conversations while sitting on the slope looking down at the river. You know that thing? Anyway, they're there. I'm sure that makes way more sense in Japanese cultural context. They're looking at her from above. That rainbow, that's where we see the clouded sky. I thought that shot was maybe just used to make Amane seem nice and to show us the parallelism of the cloudy sky in the real world and the rainbow that is in both the real world and Amane's like marching band thing. But now this makes a little bit more sense. So because there is the background thing that she was raised in a deeply religious household, it's now a pretty reasonable interpretation that these thou shall, whatever, are the tenets of some movement or cult even. The symbol on the flags that Amane is using in her Purge March thing, plus there's that symbol on a balloon that the man and her daughter, his daughter, if that's who that is, bring into a house. And I was confused by that. Why is the symbol on that balloon? Well, a possible reading is that they are part of the same cult, saw her take care of the cat, and that is vulgaris. That is vulgar. in their interpretation, convenient for them interpretation of vulgar. If that seems weird to you, that taking care of a cat would mean you're dirty or unclean, you blissfully don't have a lot of experience with cults. I think that's a totally reasonable reading. Yep, I definitely understand that now that you've added that information. Immediately before the taser scene, an adult man and a young girl are shown to have witnessed Amane's contact with the cat. The young girl is presumably one of Amane's classmates, given her uniform and the symbol on her balloon, the latter of which appears on Fantasy Amane's flags. This is likely a symbol of the particular cult Amane and her parents are members of. The man, presumably the girl's father, goes into Amane's apartment, or at least speaks with her mother at the door. Right, they go to an apartment that Amane goes into later, and that's where a wire got crossed for me. But there is now a reasonable reading that appears, where we can infer that they told Amane's mother what they saw, hence Amane's shocking punishment. This is why when Amane goes home, she finds that the cat is gone, and her mother tases her immediately upon entering the room, or starts up the taser. What was that? We went from 0 to 60 really quick. It's a cult. Okay, yeah, that makes some sense. And now a lot of the imagery makes a lot more sense. If it's a cult, but it's their thing, it's not like the whole society is like this, that makes it make a lot more sense why Amane thinks the way she does. So to clarify, just so everyone is following along, Amane seems to agree with the cult's values. Now, she's 12 and was abused by a parent that presumably agrees with those values. And so you have to go back to that conversation before about did she have a meaningful opportunity to not agree with those values? Is not aligning with those values a defensive response to the situation that she was in? But, well, she says, you're kind of taking away my agency. You may now view those comments as kind of an argument against herself. She's saying, I knew well enough that it is wrong to embrace this totalitarian mindset, which I did deliberately. Whereas you might have been thinking, well, no, she didn't do it deliberately. She's 12. Her parents introduced her to that. Well, if that's true, that does change. Now it's sort of flipped. If she has the agency, that's bad in some ways. Argues that she is saying, I agree. I wasn't just imposed on these values. These values weren't just imposed on me. I agreed with them consciously, which at the very least I would imagine would change a lot of people's interpretation of what she did. Anyway, thou shalt deliver unto those thou believest in. Now, with the context that it's a religious upbringing, we can now, I kind of glossed over this before on purpose because I knew this section was coming, and was going to unpack it later or wouldn't have time to unpack it. We're definitely going to now. Thou shalt deliver onto those who thou believest in. Deliver, in a religious context, here presumably meaning save or remedy, get back on track, deliver. Thou shalt deliver onto those thou believest in. So if you believe that, if you have some faith in the person, or think the person is aligned with the movement and they lose their way, then you're meant to get them back on track. The thou believest in, I guess, means your duty isn't to do that for everybody, but for people in this movement, you're meant to enforce, basically, is the word I'm going to use here. Yeah? As PistilWhip puts it, this is the dogma that most directly informs Amane's motive. She seems to believe her mother had lost her faith and must therefore be delivered. Now, this is a really important point if you are getting invested in the outcome of this child's guilt. You can notice here that the philosophy that this child has been surrounded with does seem to say to do exactly this, but it's also pretty obvious to notice that if you didn't have this philosophy, there might be a feeling of retribution if your parent abused you. Notice that this philosophy says to do the same thing, but it kind of launders the motivation a little bit. We'll get back to that later. Thou shalt stay thine course, then perish. This one is difficult to interpret without the background material. In the second voice drama, prison guard S suffers a headache that brings them to their knees. Amane responds with, do get back up by yourself, all right? That's a trial given to you by God. It's this kind of religious person. Both pain and illnesses are trials. According to our teachings, those who run from them are the worst evil there is. That's one of the four great principles. No matter who you are, that cannot be forgiven. This belief is why Amane abided her mother's abuse. If she were to flee or seek outside help, she would violate the fourth great principle. Well, again, you can see how, in a way, this kind of launders the situation a little bit. I mean, people often abide, if you want to call it abiding, the abuse of people around them because they feel trapped. Was it because of that? Or was it because a religion that she wholeheartedly believes in says to do it? If you are being abused, this is maybe not the easiest thing to pair apart. I think it's reasonable to say. And so, do you see the narrative as Amane wholeheartedly believes all of this, didn't think she was being abused, and then simply retaliated against her mother because the religion or cult tells them to? Or did she straightforwardly feel abused, but then use and now is sort of reconciling it, or even deliberately using the rhetoric of the religion to explain those actions? You see what I mean? Whether those change how you feel about what she did, whatever. I'm just saying you agree those are significantly different events. The things that literally happened to her are different, meaningfully different. If she just thought it was the religion the whole time and like it was bad and hurt, but she reconciled it as like this is the normal thing and mostly had like a maladapted but normal experience, or did she feel like it was abuse but just their religion has a very clear line of reasoning or laundering for this, and so she's calling upon that? You see what I mean? The way that she words the thing to the prison guard that you gave us, PistilWhip, makes it feel to me like either she does wholeheartedly believe it, or she is reconciling the pain by embracing those things. You know what I mean? If you went through this, would it not then seem convenient that there are these rules that just explain what happened to you, and now everything makes sense, instead of your parent who's supposed to take care of you abusing you? You see what I mean? So, lyrical analysis 2. Guilt and forgiveness. This is from the chorus, which says, Do shomonai, kuzukara no do shomonai, sono koto zettai 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 zettai. You remember that? Yurusaranai. The it can't be helped from the scum who can't be helped. That makes them doubtlessly, clearly, absolutely, unequivocally, beyond any doubt, guilty, is what that part means. This is the bridge to the chorus, or the pre-chorus. It should be noted that the more direct translation of yurusaranai is unforgivable, rather than guilty. Indeed, the two verdicts handed down by Milgram, this media project, are innocent, yurus, forgive, or guilty, yurusaranai, unforgive. Kind of hard to translate. This doesn't necessarily sound especially intense to a Western ear, but I do know the cultural context for this. And PistilWhip says, in the more tightly knit social culture of Japan, refusal to forgive someone carries much more weight. In English, we might refer to that as burning bridges, such that they may never be crossed again. This is the intended impact behind a shonen character shouting, I'll never forgive you, to a despicable villain. It represents a finality, a rift that cannot be crossed, rather than simply, you did a bad thing. Yurusaranai is sometimes localized as, I'll make you pay, or you'll pay for that. Yes, that's the most common one I've seen. To better capture this nuance, though it still diverges somewhat, unforgiveness does not necessarily entail vengeance or punishment. There does happen to be vengeful punishment in the context of the Purge March, but unforgiveness could just as easily refer to a severance of ties. I want to pause on this part a bit. Yes, there's an important Japanese cultural idea here that is sort of othering people that you do not agree to re-sign the social contract with. And that context is something I know from studying Japanese, and I don't think would be present if I had not. So if you do not have that context, I imagine this is a new cultural idea, or at least an unfamiliar or uncomfortable cultural idea to most of the people watching. So briefly, there's this idea that in a society that is so heavily focused on you get a job and you're useful to society and it's really hard to get fired, and there's a sort of reciprocity of societal responsibility, and food is subsidized by the government. And did you know Japan has like a national storage of rice? They just have like a shit ton of rice, like somewhere in case they It's the most Japanese thing of all time. I'm not saying that's necessarily that bad of an idea, by the way. Like, I'm just saying it's a little weird. But that is the type of society that Japan at least was very recently, or is close to now, having not lived in modern Japan. I don't know, but that is a culture where you go out to work, and maybe after work you have some drinks, and they're kind of obligatory drinks. And a lot of people in Japan don't genetically deal with alcohol in a super favorable way, but it's the work culture, and there's a lot of a weird type of pressure to go do that. And you go traveling, and at the gift shop, when you come back from traveling, they sell like snacks and gifts that are specifically, they're called giri. What's the word for gift? Giri something, which is like obligation gifts. These are the thing you basically are expected to always buy, and it's a serious social faux pas not to buy these sort of obligatory snacks on the way back and then hand them out at the office. Like, this is literally, it will be a local specialty, and they'll have like 20 kind of weirdly small serving sizes of it so that you can give it to everybody in your office, is the idea. And it's expected to be just like, that's just part of going there. Now, with food subsidized as heavily as it can be in Japan, my understanding is these aren't like super expensive or anything. Like, that's not really an issue. Plus, Japan has decent rail transit. And so, I mean, it's already, if you live in the US, you might be thinking, good Lord, anytime you go on a vacation, you also have to buy everybody souvenirs. Like, I don't think it's that much of a financial burden, is my understanding. But are you getting the picture? This is a society where if you do something that is, by the social rules, kind of impolite or wrong, you have a society of, I'm really sorry we did this wrong. You apologize sort of formally and accept responsibility, and then are forgiven in a way that isn't like social forgiveness, but is more of a sort of societal forgiveness. We are including you back into the re-signed social contract. Yuru saranai in that context is, I will not re-sign the social contract for you, which is a pretty big thing to say in a society that's built all of those ways. This is my best encapsulation of the cultural weight of saying that. It's also interesting that the Milgram Media Project is purposefully using yurus, which again I would say has a slightly more formal meaning here. You're yurused, forgiven. I would almost say this is a type of soft salvation. Like, that's a rather serious thing in some contexts in Japanese. Or guilty being yurusaranai, unforgive. I would say that in cultural contexts, guilty is less bad than yurusaranai, unforgiven. That's an opinion. I don't know. I'm just a student of Japanese, but it seems to me like that is the nuance that changes here. Guilty, you're in jail. Probably most people in the United States, where I live, think that guilty in jail is worse than yurusaranai. You're not forgiven for like insulting me at the company dinner or something. But that, I don't think that is the cultural context that's happening under. Do also note that obviously outside of Japanese cultural context, a cult is a place where you do something wrong and you get ostracized. It's a bit more extreme than just like, I'm not forgiving you. Similarly, PistilWhip continues, the phrase doshiomanai can be more literally translated as there is nothing to be done. Usually this can't be helped. Here, the cultural nuance isn't in the localization so much as the association with Japanese beliefs such as gambaru and gaman, essentially perseverance in the face of hardship. In other words, I can't do anything about this situation, so I'll just have to tough it out. Indeed, while I don't begrudge this, saying, gambaru or gambate when you're in a situation often means deal with the crunch, which is, as cultural values go, I've got some issues with that. And gaman, kind of abiding or enduring the hardship. Gaman shite, like just stick it out, is, I'm just going to say, put my belief on the table. It is virtually always bad to stick anything out. Do not let people make you feel like you're supposed to stick out hardship. I just am not going to put being the cultural context guy in front of, I don't want you, the listener, to feel like that it's not fair. You don't need to be treated that way. You do not need to gaman shite. That's bullshit. Very often just gaslighting. However, Amane turns that around, referring to her mother as scum that can't be helped, someone who's beyond rehabilitation. Amane's stoic endurance has reached its end, and she's crossed the threshold beyond forgiveness. There's no recourse but to punish her mother, or so her narrative seems to go. As a parting note, the localization takes the repeated zetai, absolute, and gives a unique translation for each one. Remember zetai, 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 yurusaranai, that thing? Well, the translation we're given is that makes them doubtlessly, clearly, absolutely, unequivocally, beyond any doubt, guilty, which is where the absolutely, doubtlessly, clearly, absolutely, unequivocally, beyond any doubt parlay title of this parlay came from. Note that those doubtlessly, clearly, absolutely, etc. are added by the official localization, but from the translation is the point. In Japanese, you're saying zetai. People would even say zetai yurusarenai is like not a grammatically incorrect or ridiculous Japanese sentence. Repeating words like that, maybe not 5 times, but like, okay, twice or something, is not like super strange in the Japanese language context, especially in song lyrics. This is a pretty common tactic, in my opinion, in Japanese lyrics. So right, there's it's just interesting to see that you absolutely cannot be forgiven has been turned into this like other thing. And it might be worth noting, as you say, the second pre-chorus adds 2 more zetai, again with unique translations, just as Amane returns home where her mother is waiting with the taser. Thus, this might be seen as the moment where Amane resolves to punish her mother. Yes, if you were to watch back through this song with the subtitles, you'll notice that this is one of those songs that does the thing where when the lyrics are saying one thing, they're careful to have the visuals be showing something relevant to that at that moment. And there are not very many parts of the song that are like, yes, they're a little abstract, but that are not about the subject on the screen. They take some care to make sure that that's usually coherent. We're going to talk about the chorus a little bit more now, so I won't get into it just here. Let's keep going. Lyrical analysis 3, the chorus marches on. Chorus 1, I'm just going to read. It is purging day, I disavow you. I'm not going to sing it. If you just open your eyes corrupted must be crushed. It is purging day, so nary a sound can be uttered a second time. If you just open your eyes, I'll crush your throat too. These are, it was bad to deliver it that way. There's like a chorus and then a main singer. For the sake of this discussion, PistilWhip says, I will refer to the primary vocalist as the Grand Marshal, the leader of the parade, and the backup vocalists as the choir. So the Grand Marshal is saying, I disavow you. Eyes corrupted must be crushed, so nary a sound can be uttered a second time. I'll crush your throat too. And the chorus is saying, it is purging day. If you just open your eyes, if it's purging day, if you just open your eyes, and now you can see how that's meant to sort of transpose with, I kind of wish that you would see the light and do what our religion tells us to do, but I'm going to destroy you because you've become vulgaris. During the chorus, the choir falls in A-B-A-B scheme, but the Grand Marshal breaks steps, so to speak, A-B-C-D. That is to say, the third and fourth lines do not follow the same rhythm as the first and second. How might we interpret that? Put a pin in it. As for the lyrics themselves, I think the choir's repetition of It is Purging Day and If you just open your eyes are indications that Amane does feel some reluctance with regard to killing her mother. Or at least that Amane maybe seems a little more sincerely to believe these things, rather than it being a way to reconcile the thing that happened to her or that she did. You remember that topic from before? You could view this as a data point in favor of her believing that rhetoric. If you would just open your eyes sounds like if you would only do what our religion tells us to do, rather than, I don't think if you would just open your eyes, it is purging day is the kind of thing that someone just being abused would say. That feels like it's from the cult context. So interesting. The deadline has arrived. I hope you will repent is one way to read that. Of course, we know that her mother did not repent, at least not in any way that Amane would accept, since she killed her. I don't think much needs to be said about the Grand Marshal's I disavow you, eyes corrupted must be crushed, so nary a sound can be uttered a second time, I'll crush your throat too. pretty clear. And if you like, you might consider that to be a data point that Amane is doing this strictly to retaliate and not for a religious purpose. I think that's interesting here. The choir sounds like they're pretty much the values of this weird cult religion, but the Grand Marshal voice, which you might read as being Amane's internal voice, does seem wrathful or absolute in a way that does seem to go beyond the religious trappings a little. This is that pin from before. It's interesting to note how the choir falls in ABAB song scheme, but the Grand Marshal does not. And so could we see this as Amane breaking from like the religion, which she did literally do? Remember, she treated the cat and that was not kosher, and a lot worse than that. And therefore, like, this happened. And so I do think that, like, that reading is not a huge stretch. That doesn't feel like a mistake. And there is a feeling that I think they did a good job with, where it does kind of feel like she's breaking from the song a little, mostly in this second part, so we'll get to it in a minute. The song presents yet another lyrical deviation in the bridge, which uses the same lyrics as the first chorus, but in a softer, more somber fashion. It's only at the final "Agemasho," I'll give it to you, that the Grand Marshal's zeal returns, and it's very noticeable toward the end of the song. If you've listened to it, you'll probably recall the part where they're going back through the do shomanai, etc., do shomanai. They're near that part, or maybe it's not near that part, I'm having trouble organizing the song. We get, if you're going to break your vow, it's my turn to tear you apart. So there is no second time. I will kaishite agemasho. I'll give back the judgment you gave to me. Kaishite, give it back. Agemasho, I'll give it to you. Kaishite, I'll return it. And that does feel like she's kind of breaking out of the flow of the song a little bit musically. It's made to sound like an individual voice, and this is spoken, briefly not sung. I think that stands out. The second chorus is completely different. The Grand Marshal has led the parade into its next phase. This is no longer a question. The hour of purging has arrived, and punishment will be meted out. It should also be noted that the formerly white confetti now comes in red, yellow, green, and blue, just as the flags do. This is a declaration of intent and fulfillment with respect to the four great principles. The rhyme scheme is otherwise the same as the first chorus, ABAB for the choir and ABCD for the Grand Marshal. Interesting. The confetti color thing, I didn't notice that. So the white confetti becomes red, yellow, green, blue. This is the type of literary interpretation that I feel like a lot of people object to. So I just want to say, well, they obviously did choose that to be that way for some reason, yes. And so it's reasonable to speculate what some reasons are. I think the only time it gets unreasonable is when people suddenly make a wild, complicated interpretation, but don't include just a simpler interpretation. For example, could it simply be that this was done because it is the finale of the song, and it makes it look a bit more like festive or whatever? Maybe it was white at first because that helps us think of it as being like the rain falling when we cut to her normal life. Perhaps. And one thing I think is good about including those simpler interpretations is that they draw attention to, it does seem kind of weird to make the confetti a different color scheme just for those effects. So it seems kind of reasonable that maybe it's for an additional effect. And then I think the most obvious thing to think is those are the colors of the symbol of the cult that they're part of. And so they didn't have those colors before, but now they do. Maybe means that to Amane, this is the right thing to do. Is that weird of an interpretation? I personally think no. But if you suddenly say the white confetti turning red, yellow, green, and blue, which of course implies that the religion approves of her actions, I understand how some people sometimes, by that I mean like all the time, I experienced this a lot in college. People tend to go, oh, but that's like such a leap, or that seems random, or such a big interpretation. Why don't they just like say that it's the right thing to do? I mean, one reason is this whole song and the entire media project is about you thinking about whether you think it's the right thing to have happened. And so, I mean, of course, they're not just going to tell you, But it wants a statement of thematic intent. I mean, what does Amane think, right? And she maybe doesn't know in terms that you would want, right? Did you do this to maliciously murder someone? Well, she said in the interview she thinks that ethics and morals are both emotions, are both insignificant factors. So the question that maybe some audience members want, did you do this maliciously? According to Amane, doesn't have an answer in her value system. So you can't just say, like, do you think you did something wrong? You know what I mean? Like, you can say it, but that's not going to give you a meaningful answer. And you will find that people who have a different dogma than you, usually, like, you can't just say, like, tell me if you're wrong according to me. Like, their answer is, I don't know. Who cares? Like, it's none of my bit. Like, I don't care about that. So anyway, yes, an interesting chunk of the song. And finally, lyrical analysis for the sentencing. This is the outro. I'm going to read the text, though I did read them at the beginning, just to refresh your memory. She says twice, you're sorry, I don't care, please go ahead and die already. Remember my cries, my repents, my words of I'm sorry that I said to you. It seems likely to me, PistilWhip says, that the outro is comprised of the last words Amane spoke to her mother. Certainly the way it's written is like, you said this to the person. The scum that couldn't be helped, her mom, never listened to Amane's pleas for mercy. Amane therefore returns the favor and the judgment in full. As said in both choruses, there will be no second time. So there is no second time. I'll give back the judgment you gave to me. So nary a sound can be uttered a second time. I'll crush your throat too. So, zooming out for a moment from this long, big-ass, crazy adventure parlay that took me quite a while in real time to execute because I'm doing it as I go. I think this was a fun format to do this in, though, don't you think? I think the thing to be struck by is that this is a very deliberately crafted piece of work. The lyrics are designed to make it somewhat ambiguous or able to be interpreted both ways. A lot of this wording is specific enough that you wouldn't have worded things this way this consistently without meaning to imply there's a whole reading that's just she's retaliating against her mom, and there's a whole reading that's she genuinely believes all this stuff. There's a whole reading that's she's internalized abuse, and there's a whole reading that's like she didn't and thought that this was some religious thing. There's a whole reading that's she's using the religion as a narrative to enact her vengeance, and there's a whole reading that's she legitimately thinks that this is all okay because that's how she was raised. We don't. It's left for us to consider. And again, it's interesting that they chose, the media project as a whole, chose to have her pull the card of, like, when does my agency matter? Because so much about this situation tempts us to say, isn't that just because her parents did X? And she's saying, well, no, like, it's because I think this or that. Yet, the whole premise of the discussion includes this idea that she has this religion, this external thing, not her personal values, though she seems to consider them to be, but values from elsewhere. You know, even if she claims she's not indoctrinated, she didn't found the cult that they're part of. You see what I mean? And so that's weird. That's intentional and a fun part of the project. I interpret it as intentional anyway. It's ubiquitous. So I think it would be weird to act like that's like not a real theme. You know, like there's so much of it. It doesn't matter whether the people who made it intended it, and they very clearly did intend it because the entire media project supports it. But that, you know, doesn't really matter. The point is there are all these details. It's a piece of media with some interesting shot composition. I enjoyed the little music video, tiny 3-minute anime short story. It was interesting. It's a fun kind of interpretation for Parley. Not so obvious that there isn't that much room for discussion without a big reach, but not so obscure that you can't possibly penetrate the text, right? A complete enigma this is not. Most of it is like, it's fairly reasonable to conclude, oh, she's a magical girl and she took vengeance on her mother, whatever I said at the beginning of the parlay, you know. You can go back and listen, which I guess I will go back and listen to what I said. Or, you know, they're part of a cult, or I said an authoritarian regime earlier on, which is off, but to be fair, I think that was sort of a good guess. You get the idea. And so I think that this was a really good fit for Parley. I think that it's funny. The next Parley in the list is somebody asking to like push the boundaries of Parley, basically, which it's funny that this one happened to come right before that, because this is a good example of that. I think this is the type of Parley that if I just read all of it, it would just be me doing like a ton of weird research and having a really non-candid reaction. But provided, I mean, this was a long Parley, I'm happy to do this one, but provided they're a little bit shorter, I think that this, I just do it live and pause the recording whenever I need to, is a fun format to do these in. Like, I thought that was neat. And it also means that if you want to follow along, you can very easily. You can just pause it when I pause it and go, you know, do that part of the exercise or whatever, and then come back. You know, a weird square that you want to circle with Parley is this idea that I'm reacting on the spot. Yes, that keeps it in scope. I can't actually write a 1.5 hour video essay about this song I've never heard of for $9. Like I just isn't, that's too much work for that amount of thing. And so doing it on the spot, combined with me being a person who's cultivated the ability to talk about that on the spot, makes it possible for these to exist. But it is also on me to be a person who is interested in getting the most out of it for the time we have. And I'll tell you just personally, that is what I really like about Parley. I enjoy having to do that. It's not a burden to think, like, what are the ways you could do this, and let's pick a good one. As long as it's not like, you know, don't be mean, I guess. But as long as there's, I mean, there was a pretty clear through line here. You literally said, do this, this, and this, and then here's a bunch of sections. Like, that's not hard or mean or anything. It was really cool. Thank you for essentially collecting all this information so I could enjoy it, and I hope that you enjoyed me trying to synthesize it and create a bit of a narrative. This is one of those Parley that I would describe, and I guess I shouldn't talk about this too much because I'm about to record a Parley that's about this same thing in a way. There's like different kinds of Parley, vaguely. And this has often not been a profitable way for me to think about this, but I think it is here. This is one of those Parley that's more like a presentation, but then it has the layer of me live going through the layers of like the rabbit hole or presentation. Pretty cool. I just think this is a promising format for Parley, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I'm absolutely happy to do this one just as longer. And to be fair to you, like, I'm not exactly sure. Like, it would be difficult to make this Parley much shorter, sure, without just not including the lyrical analysis. But normally it would need to be. But I definitely owe you a little extra. This one has been delayed for a while. So I was happy to, and I just want to, of course, right? It's just not sustainable to have every Parley be this huge thing. But and this was so well planned out too. Like, it's such a well structured one. It was a lot of fun. I'm quite interested in this now. Like, maybe I will go dig into these. I especially want to see the, you know what, in the description, I will also link the previous video from this girl, from, so Amane's video from, I guess, season 1. Is that right? Which is called Dream? Why am I hallucinating the name of it? Anyway, we just said it like 3 times, but this Parley's been very long. I'll link that in the description too. Just as a little invitation, if you listened through the end of this Parley, you probably did find this kind of interesting. Let's go check it out. I think that would be fun. Again, not sponsored, obviously. On the contrary, it's PistilWhip that paid. Or you may have been gifted this particular Parley. But the point is, I think it's neat. I don't know. One thing I like about not having a heavy focus on external, like, companies' revenue is that we can just talk about properties, and it's okay to completely lampoon them or praise them a lot and recommend them without it. You know, it's not really part of my business model. And so we can just do that. That is worth a lot to me. I also just don't like working with other businesses. I don't like the way most businesses do what they do. But this sounds cool, so I'm happy. I don't know. I'm happy to recommend that. That's neat. I like this kind of multimedia project. It seems vaguely stressful to actually do, to me. Like, I don't really want to run one of these. I mean, I don't think I do. Maybe I do. I don't know. It seems like a lot of work. And I'm not sure I want to make the format in which I deliver the things I'm making more strict. but you could also view it as a crafted format. It's very specific, right? Let's just go over again. The Milgram project, PistilWhip tells us, proceeds in distinct phases: text-based interrogations, Q&A, and we got a little of one of those, I think, on the Milgram Portal mobile app, a voice drama immediately preceding the MV, the music video. We got a little bit of one of those, or the text of one of those. The music video itself, and lastly, voting in the app for an innocent or guilty verdict. Now, yeah, you got to do all that specific stuff, sure. But I could also imagine a creator who thought, well, I want to give you more background dialogue and let people kind of make their case on their own and provide materials. These are the materials I have. They wrote a book or something, and they had a ton of dialogue that went unused, and then thought, what if I make something else as the core thing, where having a ton of extra dialogue would inform the thing that I'd made? Something more abstract than writing a novel, like a music video that tells a story. I don't know, the novel thing is just a random example, but you see what I mean. And then the voting, just the audience tells you if they want more or less of that character. That's kind of nice. You see what I mean? Maybe this is really good. I know you didn't request or provoke any discussion about this angle. It's just something I find very interesting, like as a person who could, if they wanted to, attempt to do something like this. I often look at these and go, yeah, I don't know if I can't tell if this will be fun, you know? So I just thought it was interesting. I love hearing about this type of project as well. So yeah, it was really neat. Do I have anything else to say? Yeah, I just want to remind you that I liked this song musically a lot. If you listen through this whole parlay and you didn't listen to the song, I think at the very least you will find the sound of the song to be interesting, even if you don't want to get into like the whole narrative or whatever. And this would be a good example of how you get an interesting sound to a song by the mood or meaning of the song being bizarre, you know, weird. Would have led the people making the music to make a particular kind of music. And I think that for the most part, once you have gotten into a subject, almost everybody is somewhat literate with interpreting music because we just listen to it. You basically can enjoy things as long as they're specific. And therefore, if you're thinking, well, but it doesn't sound like my kind of thing, you have context, and it's a subject that you're in the door of, you know, you listen to some music. I think those are basically the ingredients for enjoying something. And so I don't know, like I will probably enjoy this more having gone through this. Actually, just a side note, since we're here. I mean, this is a long ass parlay anyway, so what are you going to do? Not include this part? That is how I have most of my music. It's specific anime openings or endings I liked, or a song by an artist that did an anime opening or ending I liked, or the song from when I started taking bass lessons as a high school student and told my bass teacher, he said, what music do you listen to? And I said, I don't. And he said, leave, go get an iPod and come back, which I did. And then, you know, this song is like one of the first songs that I had ever owned when I was like 14. If that seems weird to you, that is a thing about me. I don't know. I was not similar to this at all when I was younger. I'm unrecognizable physically and mentally to the person I previously was. I did not just change. I, in many cases, believe the exact opposite of what I believed when I was younger, radically. And I did not hold those opinions very lightly when I was younger either. It's not like I was wishy-washy and became dogmatic or whatever. It was dogma all the way down. No, I wouldn't say that. But anyway, just to say, I mean, I thought music was cringe, basically, is what I'm getting at. I did not have I was like, oh, I didn't think to get some music to listen to. I actively thought people who listen to music with their headphones in all the time are idiots and should be avoided, which, I mean, currently, that's definitely me, for one thing. And secondly, what? Like, why? You know, like, what bee was up my ass? And yet I could tell you, we're just not going to get into that here. I wasn't justified. That's not justified. And so a lot of the music, almost all of the music that I have that I listen to day-to-day life is music that has a shit ton of context. That's the point I'm trying to make. This song probably has among the least context of any of those songs. It's just because I had vaguely associated this deco asterisk 27 thing, the handle of this project creator, the musician, Vocaloid producer, and songwriter that was involved in this thing, as being a person who made music that I liked or liked the sound of and thought was like a little refreshing, unusual from my perspective. That's it, which is for the music that I listen to, a very low amount of context among music. And I liked the song almost entirely just because of its weird musicality. I just find it sort of eerie in a fun way. I like how cheerful and yet fatalistic sounding the lyrics that I half understand because of my level of Japanese sound. That is what I liked about it. I don't know. I like the weird kind of creepy intro where we're talking to the whole marching. I don't know. It's just interesting to me. I don't know why I included this part, but I just think that is worth discussing. There's a way of being interested in all of this stuff that I sometimes feel like, you guys know I am quite intensely interested in most of the topics of all these parlay things, all of those things as something that one person is interested in, because I view it as there is no limit on what people are interested in. People just, if the conditions are met, you would be interested in everything, absolutely everything. There are very few things that are like inherently not interesting. There's like no way to make it interesting, I don't think. And this is a great example of like what an obscure out of left field thing as we started listening to it. But not only did I already have it as a song on my phone, I actually already enjoyed it without all of this context. I just find that to be an interesting, charming thing to have happened. So, folks, this parlay is double the length of a normal parlay, but as long as it would be able to fit into about half of this time, we'd love to have you aboard. If you'd like to get your own parlay like this one, you can do that using a link in the description. Love to have you. It doesn't need to be an entire guided, mind-bending experience with a music video story and literary analysis in 4 different parts. You can just say, hey, how about that AI art situation, or what have you? I don't know. I don't especially want you to or not to ask that. I'm just saying it doesn't need to be as long if you don't want it to. And again, obviously you do need to make some effort to keep it in scope, but a lot of the time I'm going to try to be flexible because I like doing these. Thanks for asking this one. Looking forward to the next one.